when recovery divers found the remnants of Flight 358AA off the Atlantic coast. Amidst twisted metal and floating luggage, one item stood out: a water-damaged phone, miraculously intact. What stunned investigators even more wasn't the phone's survival, but the final unsent message on its screen. "Lillian, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. I need you to know everything I never said." The screen dimmed, battery finally dead, but those words frozen in time would echo far beyond the wreckage. Rewind 24 hours. Andrew Carter had never missed a flight in his life. He was the definition of punctual, the kind of man who wore a watch, even though his phone told time more accurately. But that morning, something was different. He stood in the doorway of his daughter's room, watching her tiny chest rise and fall beneath a mountain of plush animals. Emma, 6 years old, had snuck into their bed, sometime around midnight, after a nightmare about flying dinosaurs. Lillian had scooped her up, groggy but loving, and carried her back to her room after dawn. Now they both slept, his entire world wrapped in that moment of peace. The flight wasn't for another 3 hours. But Andrew couldn't bring himself to leave just yet. He leaned against the frame, clutching his suitcase handle, debating whether to wake Lillian for a proper goodbye. He D'd in single quotes teed on instead. He tiptoed to the kitchen and scribbled a quick note on a post-it. "Didn't want to wake you. Tell Daddy we'll FaceTime tonight. I love you more than I've ever been able to say." He pressed the note onto the fridge door and stared at it for a second longer than usual. The moment lingered. He didn't know why, but something inside him hesitated. A whisper, a feeling, one he couldn't shake. His cab honked. He grabbed his laptop bag and headed out. The city was alive in its usual chaos. Honking horns, screeching brakes, early morning joggers, and espresso-fueled office workers flooding sidewalks. But inside that cab, Andrew felt disconnected. As if the world was moving and he was sitting still. He stared out the window, recalling the conversation he and Lillian had the night before. It hadn't been dramatic, just one of those passing talks about one more trip and almost done, and next month we'll finally rest. But he knew better. There was always another trip, another meeting, another promise of rest that never came. Andrew was exhausted, not just from work, but from living in a constant state of postponement, delaying life, delaying time with his daughter, delaying quiet Sunday mornings wrapped in flannel blankets. With nowhere to be, he reached JFK Airport 90 minutes before boarding. A long security line snaked through the terminal. As he waited, he kept scrolling through photos on his phone. Stopped him cold. It was Lillian, not posed, not filtered. Just her, standing in their backyard garden, arms crossed, hair pulled back, a smudge of dirt on her cheek, laughing at something Emma had said. She looked real, raw, beautiful, and he suddenly realized he hadn't told her that in weeks. Maybe months. He sat at his gate early, boarding pass in hand, waiting for Group 3 to be called. All around him, business travelers typed aggressively on laptops. A baby cried somewhere to the left, and flight announcements buzzed overhead. Andrew opened his phone again. He went into the Notes app and began typing. "Lillian, I don't even know why I'm writing this. I just feel like I should. Like I need to. Maybe it's the silence around me, or the fact that I've been feeling off for weeks. Like I've forgotten how to breathe, unless I'm with you and Emma. I'm scared. Not of flying, but of missing out. Of living a life that looks good on paper, but feels empty when I'm alone in hotel rooms. If something happens, if this is the last thing I ever say to you, I want you to know I loved you completely. Even when I didn't show it. Even when I got lost in work and stress and distractions. You were always my home." He stopped there. His hands trembled slightly as he read the words back. Maybe it was silly. Maybe he was just tired. But something about the letter made him feel more alive than he had in months. The boarding call for Group 3 broke his concentration. He copied the note into a text message draft, then added, "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it." He stared at that sentence. Something in him screamed to delete it. Superstition, fear. But instead, he saved the message and placed the phone in his carry-on, next to his headphones and charging cable. He'd finished the message mid-flight. He always liked writing with a coffee in hand and clouds beneath his feet. He never got the chance. At 37,000 feet, 3 hours into the journey, Flight 358AA encountered sudden mechanical failure over the Atlantic. Communications were lost within minutes. Emergency protocols failed. The black box would later record 23 seconds of silence, before the signal vanished completely. When the Coast Guard recovered the floating debris days later, They found what little remained of Andrew Carter's belongings, including his phone, sealed tight in his bag, still holding the message that never got sent. A message never meant to be read. Yet, the message that said everything that mattered. Lillian Carter was just finishing Emma's breakfast when the news broke. She had the morning all planned: drop Emma at school, fold the laundry, maybe water the plants. It was a crisp August morning, and sunlight poured through the kitchen window, kissing the marble countertops and dancing on the sticky note Andrew had left behind. She smiled at it while flipping pancakes. Didn't want to wake you. Tell Daddy we'll FaceTime tonight. I love you more than I've ever been able to say. He always left notes like that. Even if they didn't always talk deeply or get everything right between them, Andrew had his ways of showing he cared. She had kept dozens of those notes in a shoebox beneath their bed. She planned to turn them into a scrapbook someday. That morning, Emma was unusually quiet, playing with her blueberries on the side of her plate. Is Daddy already on the plane? She asked. Yep, baby, he's on his way to Seattle, Lillian replied, brushing a lock of hair behind her daughter's ear. And we'll call him later, just like we always do. They said their goodbyes. She dropped Emma off at her elementary school, watched her skip through the gates in her tiny pink backpack, and blew her a kiss from the car. It was 8:14 a.m. At 8:47 a.m., Lillian returned home and put on a podcast. She started folding clothes. Everything was normal, maddeningly normal. The news didn't reach her the way you might expect. Not through a phone call, not from an airline representative. It was a breaking news banner across her phone. Breaking: American Airlines Flight 358 AA loses contact over Atlantic. Search underway. Her hands froze mid-fold. She stared at the screen. Her brain couldn't process the letters Flight 358. AA was that Andrew's flight. Her mind sprinted. She threw the clothes down, pulled up the email from the airline. The confirmation was right there. American Airlines 358 AA. JFK to Seattle. Departing at 6:50 a.m. Her heart sank. A tidal wave of cold crashed through her chest. She fumbled with the remote, switching to live news. The anchor's voice sounded like it came from underwater. ... Last confirmed communication occurred just after takeoff. ... Coast Guard has initiated a full-scale search effort. 231 passengers on board, including 8 crew members. Lillian staggered backward and dropped to the floor. The room spun. Her lungs couldn't find air. It felt like drowning in open space. Her fingers trembled as she tried calling Andrew. Once, twice, 3 times voicemail. Again and again. Hey, this is Andrew. Leave a message and I'll get back to you. Probably in a meeting. Or eating a really disappointing hotel sandwich. The familiar joke stabbed her now. Her voice cracked. Andrew. Please, call me back. Please tell me this isn't real. Please. She couldn't cry, not yet. She was suspended in a surreal void of denial. She tried the airline, but their emergency hotline was flooded. She called again and again. Nothing. Then came the official statement, 2 hours later. Flight 358 AA. Presumed crashed. No survivors reported. That's when her knees gave out completely. The house became a shrine of stillness. She curled up on the couch, holding one of Andrew's old flannel shirts, clutching it to her chest like a lifeline. Emma was still at school, thank God. How would she explain to a 6-year-old that her daddy was gone? That he left in the morning with a kiss on her forehead and simply never came back? The hours blurred into one another. Calls came from friends, neighbors, family. But she couldn't speak. Couldn't even open her mouth. Her ears rang. Her body felt like it was wrapped in cotton. Her husband, her best friend, the man she built a life with, was gone. Gone. But then, her phone buzzed. It was the airline. They had something. We recovered a personal device from the wreckage. It belonged to your husband. A phone, Lillian whispered. Yes, it's water damaged, but one of the data engineers managed to access the last activity. There's something you may want to read. They sent it to her inbox. Just one screenshot. It took her 3 tries to open the file. Her vision was too blurred. Lillian, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. I need you to know everything I never said. Her breath stopped. She curled into herself and howled. Not weeping, not crying. Something more primal, something from the bottom of her soul. Her hands shook violently as she kept reading the rest of the unsent message, a message he'd started writing in the terminal and never had the chance to finish. He had known somehow, some part of him had felt it. He had written not just a goodbye, but a confession of everything he had felt, but struggled to articulate. How much he missed their slow mornings, how much he regretted the trips, the long meetings, the boardrooms, how deeply he admired her strength, raising Emma while he was gone so often, how he never stopped loving her, not for one moment, and how, if this were the last thing he ever said, he wanted her to know that she was enough, more than enough, his whole world. The final line before the draft ended: I don't know what happens next, but please, don't stop living. Don't stop dancing barefoot in the kitchen. For me, Lillian stared at those words for a long time. The house around her was silent, but inside her something cracked. Not broken, not ruined, but released. Like a string pulled so tight, it finally snapped free. She curled up on the kitchen floor, under the light where she used to dance with him on Saturday mornings, and wept until there were no more tears left to give. But even in her grief, she whispered to herself, I'll keep dancing, Andrew, I promise. There's a strange stillness that comes after death, not just in the heart, but in the space the person once filled. It echoes in doorways, hovers in closets, hums behind every turned page or half-used mug. For Lillian, that stillness became unbearable in the days following the crash. Andrew's shoes were still lined up by the front door. His jacket hung on the hook by the stairs. His toothbrush sat dry and untouched beside hers. Every part of their home whispered his name, but it was the silence at the dinner table that hurt the most. Emma didn't ask many questions, not at first. Maybe it was her way of protecting herself. Or maybe she didn't fully understand that Daddy's flight didn't make it meant forever. Lillian had tried. She'd rehearsed the conversation in her head over and over again. But when she finally knelt beside Emma's bed that night and held her daughter's small hands, the words dissolved into tears. He's with the angels now, Emma had asked softly, eyes wide and glossy. Yes, baby, Lillian managed, brushing back Emma's curls. He's watching over us. Emma nodded, then reached under her pillow and pulled out a crayon drawing. Stick figures of the three of them, in a field with the sun and clouds. She'd drawn Andrew with wings. I told him I didn't want him to go, she whispered. Lillian nearly broke. In the weeks that followed, the world moved on. News outlets found new tragedies to cover. Social media forgot Flight 358 AA. But grief doesn't follow society's clock. It lingers. It waits for you in the grocery store when you pass his favorite cereal. It ambushes you when his favorite song plays unexpectedly while folding laundry. It presses on your chest when you wake up and instinctively reach for the other side of the bed, only to find cold sheets. Lillian tried everything to distract herself. She donated Andrew's work clothes to a local shelter. She packed away his watches, his papers, his backup chargers and USB drives. But she couldn't touch his phone. The airline had returned it to her in a sealed package labeled recovered device. It had dried out completely now. Still smelled faintly of salt water. Still held the unsent message he'd written to her, preserved in a screenshot on her laptop. She powered it on once. Just once. Not to read the text. She knew the message by heart. She wanted to feel closer to his fingers. To see what he saw. To trace the home screen. He always had a photo of Emma at age 4, face covered in spaghetti sauce. It made her cry, and laugh, then cry again. She found a folder labeled to do later. Inside it were 6 documents, handwritten notes, savings goals, sketches of a treehouse he planned to build. There was even an unfinished itinerary for the Paris trip they never took. Then, a folder titled simply, Letters. Inside were Word docs. Emma, age 3 inches, Emma, kindergarten Emma, wedding day, Lillian. If I'm gone, she gasped. She clicked the last one. It opened slowly, as if even the computer understood the gravity of it. Her hand trembled on the mouse. Lillian, if I'm gone, if you're reading this, I guess life pulled a fast one on me. First, know this. I love you. Not in the casual, everyday way people toss that word around. I mean it in the marrow of my bones, the depth of my soul kind of way. I know I wasn't always present. I missed things I shouldn't have. Dinners, bedtime stories, long walks on weekends. I can't get that time back, and that thought haunts me more than anything. But please, don't let it haunt you. You gave me more grace than I deserved. You loved me through the chaos. You made a home that always welcomed me back, even when I brought nothing but exhaustion and fast food. If you're alone right now, wondering how you'll raise Emma without me, don't you already have? You were always the strong one, the kind one, the one who didn't crumble. Our daughter is brilliant because of you, fierce because of you, brave because of you, I know the pain will come in waves. But someday, far from now, I hope you laugh again without guilt. I hope you find someone who loves you as completely as you've always deserved. And when you do, please don't feel you're leaving me behind. I'll be with you, always. And in the smallest of ways, I'll show up in Emma's laugh, in the smell of coffee, in the songs we used to dance to on rainy afternoons. Keep dancing, Lil. Don't stop. Andrew, the tears didn't stop for hours. She read the letter again and again. She printed it, framed it, and placed it by her bedside. And something in her heart shifted. Not closure, but clarity. A month after the crash, Lillian stood in the backyard with Emma, the same spot where Andrew once watched her hang lights and trip over the garden hose. Now, that soil was being turned for a new project. "Mummy, is Daddy helping us from the clouds?" Emma asked, as they hammered the first plank of wood. Lillian smiled. "Yes, baby. He sent us the instructions. They were building the treehouse he'd designed, blueprint and all, with help from her brother and Emma's uncles. It wasn't just a treehouse. It was a promise, a continuation, a silent vow that love doesn't end with goodbye. It echoes, it builds, it finds new shapes." And above them, the sun pierced through the trees, as Lillian whispered to the breeze, "I got your letter, love. I'll keep dancing. I'll keep building." It was Sunday morning. The sunlight peeked gently through the sheer curtains of the church hall in upstate New York. Rows of folding chairs filled with family, friends, neighbors, and people who had never even met Andrew Carter now sat still, heads bowed. A large photograph of Andrew rested on an easel by the pulpit, smiling, arms around Lillian and Emma. Caught in a moment that seemed too ordinary to become sacred, a small wooden box sat beside it. His ashes, but his presence. It filled the room. Lillian stood near the front, her hands clutching Emma's, both dressed in soft navy blue. It wasn't the color of mourning, but the color Andrew had always said brought out Lillian's eyes. "Stormy with hope," he used to say. She didn't want today to be about grief. Not entirely. Today was about legacy, and not the kind that came from careers, companies, or investments. Andrew's true legacy lived in laughter, in handwritten notes, in the memory of burned pancakes and late-night dance-offs in the living room, in the countless lives he'd touched with kindness so quiet. It didn't announce itself, but it lingered. After the choir hummed a hymn he used to whistle while shaving, Lillian stepped forward to the podium. She looked over the sea of people, faces both familiar and new. Her voice was soft, but unwavering. "I debated whether to speak today. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I didn't know where to begin. How do you condense a man like Andrew Carter into a few paragraphs? But then I realized he already wrote the ending in his last message, and he gave me, and Emma, and everyone here, something more valuable than time. He gave us his truth. He reminded me that love, when spoken, is a gift, but when lived, becomes a legacy." She paused. Emma, now sitting in the front row, clutched a small stuffed airplane in her lap. Lillian continued. "In the last letter, Andrew wrote a letter he never intended for the world to see. He said something I'll never forget. He said, 'Don't stop living. Don't stop dancing barefoot in the kitchen.' For me, that's what I want to share with all of you. Grief doesn't mean life ends. It means we carry them forward, in how we live, in how we show up for one another, in how we laugh, cry, forgive, and build, even through brokenness." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. 3 months after the memorial, the treehouse was finally finished. Lillian and Emma painted it sky blue with white trim, just like Andrew's sketch. They added fairy lights, soft pillows, and a journal they called the Captain's Log, where Emma would write letters to her dad every Sunday afternoon. Sometimes she'd draw him flying through the sky like a superhero. Other times she'd tell him about her math test, or how she got picked first for kickball. And sometimes she'd just write, "I miss you, but we're okay." Mummy smiles again. Lillian eventually returned to her freelance design work. Slowly, gently, she began accepting small projects, designing logos and websites for local businesses. But something inside her had changed. She no longer measured her success by the size of the contract or the number of hours worked. She measured it by mornings spent making pancakes with Emma, by the giggle fits over spilled juice, by the quiet moments when grief came, and instead of pushing it away, she sat with it. There was no timeline, no destination, only a journey, one step at a time. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It had no return address. Inside was a note on crisp parchment paper. Asterisk, Dear Mrs. Carter, my name is Richard DeAngelo. I was seated in 17B on Flight 358 AA, right next to your husband. I wanted you to know. He saved my life. In more ways than one. Asterisk. Lillian clutched the letter with trembling fingers. Asterisk. When the engine failed and people panicked, your husband was the one who calmed those around him. He helped 2 elderly passengers with their oxygen masks. He cracked a joke. I can't remember what it was, but it made a woman across the aisle laugh through her tears. And me, I was a mess. He looked me in the eyes and said, "Hey, if this is it, make sure the last thing you do is love hard." That stuck with me. I survived by pure luck. I was thrown from the rear section and pulled from the water with broken ribs. But what truly saved me was what he said. Since then, I've reconciled with my estranged daughter. I've started volunteering at a shelter. I've changed. Because of your husband. Thank you for sharing him with the world. With deepest respect, Richard * Lillian cried for hours that night. Not out of sorrow, but gratitude. Andrew hadn't just left her with memories. He had left ripples. He had changed lives even in his final moments. On the anniversary of the crash, Lillian and Emma stood on a cliffside overlooking the sea. Emma held a paper lantern, the kind her daddy used to light on New Year's Eve. Lillian lit it carefully, the flame flickering, rising. They released it together, one hand each, and watched as it soared into the sky. "What did you write on it, Mummy?" Emma asked. Lillian smiled through her tears. "I wrote, 'We're still dancing.'" The lantern rose higher, catching the wind, disappearing into the fading gold of the evening sun. Far above, it felt like something or someone was smiling back.